How are you today, Sandy?
I am doing real good. And you?
Doing well, thank you. Been hanging out with Mary and Elizabeth today.
Oh,
Getting ready
yeah.
for Sunday. And then every once in a while checking in on Zachariah, seeing how he's doing.
Yes. Can I ask a couple of questions before we get started here?
You bet.
Um, I can find my note where I wanted to. Oh, the book. Do you have any update on when you think we'll have the second book of that?
For Acts, so it's at the printers right now, and we're getting a preview copy either Friday or Monday. And then I think it should be, we did all the work on the front end to make sure that all the errors were removed before it went to him. And so hopefully we'll be able to just look at it and go thumbs up, and then he can turn it around in about 4 days. So if all goes according to plan, we'll have it by the end of next week. So they'll be out and ready to be. I'll let y'all know when they're ready and they're here, and that way we can make preparations for getting them. And
Okay.
So
Good.
Yep. So yeah, they came together pretty quickly. So not quite as I would have liked to have already had them in hand, but they don't work out that way. So, but
And we went out to Mardell's to get the second N.T. Wright book, and they don't have that one.
Oh, no.
So, but they had another one which looks it's this one. It's got 24 studies.
Oh, okay.
So it's got the whole, I think, from what we've already done,
Right.
what we'll do. So I figured it would be good, but then we went online and found it.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, we found one online where we also found another book that he has written, obviously quite recently, about God and the pandemic.
Oh.
Yeah, I've read the first page about 8 times.
Oh
goodness.
That good or that deep?
That goofy.
Oh
you know, there's enough time between the last time I tried to read it and this time that I have no idea what it was. So it's reading the same paragraphs over and over again.
Okay.
But I think that I find him to be quite the, I don't want to say erudite, but quite the learned person, both biblically and, being able to write like that. That's impressive.
Yeah, he's yeah, there it is. It came out in June.
So yeah, it's definitely just a little book.
Yeah. No, he's a scholar extraordinaire. So, but he's the reason that I like his New Testament commentary series is that he brings all of that down to an everyday person's level. I mean,
Yes.
he doesn't talk at this level. I have commentaries that talk at this level, and I can only hang out with them for a little while, and I've got to come over here and come back down to earth. So yeah, but I do both. So yeah, there were for the Acts series, I have 4 commentaries that I use every week. And then I have 3, there's 3 additional books that I look at as needed. But yeah, 4 books I read. So by the time May gets here, I will have read all the way through all 4 of those books. And then probably most of the other 3. Anyway. Yeah.
Maybe when I was younger. maybe,
That's okay.
Big maybe.
yes.
So, yeah, right now I'm reading the Luke commentary in the New International Commentary on the New Testament series, and then Raymond Brown, who I got introduced to in seminary. He has one of the best introductions to the New Testament ever written, in my opinion. He has he has a volume on just the birth of the Messiah. So he goes in detail in Matthew's narrative and then in Luke's narrative, and it's like 800 pages. So I'm reading the Luke section right now. And then he also has a 2-volume commentary on the death of the Messiah, which is amazing. But that's like 1,600 pages combined. So.
Oh.
Never mind.
It's okay. It's not for the faint of heart. That's the
No.
he swims in the deep waters, and so I just kind of go and I look around and go, oh yeah, okay, I get that. And it's all right. I wouldn't recommend that to the everyday reader. So
I think not.
yeah,
That'd be like when you started getting into all of the totally going blank. Last time did all the Herods.
Oh right, the Herods, yeah.
Talk about going off the deep end. I was
Right.
like, yeah, okay.
Sure. Right. Let's just go with it's Herod, and then
Yes,
call it a day.
It's one of those guys, Herod.
It's okay, yeah.
They all look alike. That's what you-
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So this week we're going to go ahead and get started. So this week we are talking about Elizabeth, and so we're going to see her contrasted with Zechariah and their response to the Annunciation of John the Baptist's birth. So she plays a role in chapter 1, 24 to 25, 39 to 45, and then 57 to 66. And so 24 and 25 is where she responds to her conception, and then she goes off into seclusion. 39 to 45 is where Mary comes and visits her, where she's at her home. And then there's the encounter between both the in utero John the Baptist and Jesus, and the Magnificat comes after that. We're not going to talk about Magnificat today or this weekend. And then 57 to 66 is when John the Baptist is born, and the people's response to that, and his naming and all that. So that's where we are this week. So again, Elizabeth is from the priestly family, descended from Aaron, but she's unable to have children. And then she remains in seclusion following finding out that she's pregnant. And then her cousin Mary comes and visits her. And then when John is born, both Elizabeth and Zechariah are freed from their silence and seclusion. So, Elizabeth, while she is she's in the family of Aaron, and therefore she has like an elevated status because she's in a priestly family. The fact that she does not have children is a strike against her socially. So the idea that so like in verse 25 when it says that the Lord looked favorably upon me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people, she would have been at least at some level socially outcast because of the fact that she didn't have children. That was if you think back to like Jacob and his wives, and Jacob loved Rachel the most, but Rachel didn't have any children for a long time, and so she gave Jacob one of her helpers. And then Leah, who was the other wife that he didn't really like, she was the one with something wrong with her eyes. We're not quite sure what that means. But she has like 6 boys. And then And then she gives him her helper. And so then it's not until Jacob has had children with 3 other women before Rachel actually has a child, and that's Joseph. And then Joseph is the one who has the fancy coat because he's the favored one, and he goes off to Egypt. And anyway, but because Rachel couldn't have children, the other wives looked down on her. They made fun of her and talked behind her back, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so that's sort of what's socially going on with Elizabeth, is that she is at some level outcast because of the fact that she doesn't have children. Now, the good thing about Elizabeth and Zechariah is that they're still faithful. Obviously, verse 6 says both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations, but they had no children. So it wasn't that they were stepping away from God because they didn't have any children. They were actually content with the fact that they didn't have children, and they were still faithfully serving God.
But he still kept praying for a
Right.
son.
Right,
Right,
which
right.
would be normal.
Yes.
The assumption is that Elizabeth was as well.
Yeah.
Because I know enough people who have battled infertility to know that just because you don't currently have a child doesn't mean that you don't want one, and continue to pray for that.
Yeah, we've got a couple in our class that this is a very, it's like walking over a sheet of ice that's starting to warm.
Mm.
So it's real hard how we're touching this. They've felt this alienation and this not being as good as others because they have no children. So
I see.
Got to kind of tread lightly.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not gonna. I'll kind of touch on it at the beginning and talk about that that the way that Elizabeth responds to this is that she's responding again with faithfulness. That and in contrast to her husband Zechariah, who responds with disbelief. So kind of doing that compare and contrast deal, and then come back to at the end when everybody's rejoicing with her, then that ties back to what Gabriel says to Zechariah in verse, oh goodness, now I've lost it. Verse 14, you will have joy and gladness and many will rejoice at his birth. So that ties that back together.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why was her confinement so long?
So depending on, I read quite a bit on this. So her seclusion is, it's recorded as 5 months. And so in our modern day Western understanding, we look at calendar months and we think 5 months and we're like, wow, that's a weird number to be gone. But if you think about how pregnancies work, it's actually 10 lunar months, 280 days. And so it was half of her pregnancy. So I think the significance is that she goes immediately from the conception and goes to seclusion, so that when she appears at some point in time, which technically isn't until she's not seen by anybody until Mary comes in verse 39, but then she's not seen by other people until he's born in verse 57. But it's this idea that it wasn't something that they did. It was it's this miraculous kind of thing. So she stays away long enough to know that that she's been away. Anyway, there's various theories on why she's gone so long. And I don't know. It's for me, it doesn't really add a whole lot. The speculation that the theorists do didn't add a whole lot for people trying to figure out how to understand this. So, but basically, it's like half of her pregnancy. She's had half of her pregnancy before Mary shows up, and then as soon as Mary shows up, then not only does Mary realize and confirm that Elizabeth is pregnant because Angel Gabriel had just told her that, but then Elizabeth realizes that Mary's pregnant because the baby in her womb leaps when she hears Mary's greeting, and so there's this mutual realization of each other's condition. Very good. All right, let's see. So, all right. I'm looking at, question 2 talks about Genesis 21, 6 and 7. So Genesis 21 is Sarah, Sarah who's in the same kind of boat as Elizabeth, where she's past childbearing years, and then has that whole scene at the Oaks of Mamre where the 3 people come and they're like, you're gonna have a child, and this time next year, and she laughs, and then she denies it, and then a year later, sure enough, they come back and there's Isaac, which means laughter. It's a fun little story. But in 21, 6 and 7, and as well as Luke 24, 125, there's this idea of the disgrace being taken away, that there's a celebration of a restoration. So I'm just going to turn to Genesis 21 here real quick. Stuck open it. So she says, let's see. Now Sarah said, God has brought laughter for me. That's Isaac's name. And everyone who hears will laugh with me. And she said, who would ever have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age. So, and then verse 25, this is what the Lord has done for me when he looked favorably upon me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people. So both of these women are celebrating the fact that in their old age, they have now had children. And Elizabeth and Sarah are in the same boat in that whole shame and outcast sort of situation socially because of not having children. But now in Genesis 21, Sarah is being reintroduced into the community as a new mother, but then we have to wait till verse 57 for Elizabeth to be re-included in community. So, all right. And there are actually, if you want to add to that particular conversation, you can look at the opening chapters of 1 Samuel. Hannah is unable to have children, and she prays, and she goes into the temple and prays for a child, and the priest Eli witnesses her praying, but she's not speaking, she's just moving her mouth, and there's this weird scene where he thinks she's drunk, but he's like, no, I'm just praying. And so it's 1 Samuel 1 and 2, and then Samuel is the son that's born in that moment, and she dedicates him to the Lord. Although she's not old at that time, she doesn't fit that category. She's of childbearing age. So you can add that one in there. And I talked about Jacob and Rachel, and that's in Genesis 30. Where am I at here? Jacob meets Rachel in chapter 29 of Genesis. Then he marries them. Chapter 30. Rachel saw she bore Jacob no children. She envied her sister. That's her sister's Leah. And then, so you can read in there. So anyway, let's see. All right. Question 3 talks about the greeting between Mary and Elizabeth, and John leaping in Elizabeth's womb. So as I was doing some research on that, let's see, the word for leaping is like skipping and bounding. It's also used as the movement of a child in the womb, just like a quickening kind of deal. And I remember the first time I felt each of our kids do that, and with Debbie. Obviously she felt it first, but then she's like, "Get over here!" And,
Now,
right now, yeah. So it's that same thing, but this is different. It's not just that normal movement, which at 5 months she probably would have already felt at some level. She realizes that this is different, that this movement of this baby is in response to Mary's voice. I mean, it immediately happens on that. And so she's filled with the Holy Spirit, and then she blesses Mary, and then there's this, there's the exchange back and forth, and out of this particular section here, you get the prayer in Roman Catholicism of the Hail Mary. And there's 3 different lines in here that get put together to make the Hail Mary prayer. So the child leaps, and it's specific. The language, the word there is not son. It's just, that's just translated as child. It's actually a specific word for child. So we don't really know that, while it's prophesied that it will be a boy, we don't actually know it's a boy until verse 57. So then there's this, blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of your womb. I'm going to talk about this on Sunday, but the word in verse 42 for blessed is the same root word for the word eulogy. So it's a good word. It's a combination word. So good word, or the word in Greek for good and the word in Greek for word come together for this this word that means, that we translate as, or transliterate as eulogy. But that's the word for blessed. However, if you turn to verse 45, where it says, and blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord, the word blessed there is actually a different word. And it's the same word that Matthew uses in the Beatitudes in chapter 5, Matthew chapter 5. Blessed is the one who, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the, meek, they inherit the earth. That's the word that he's using there. So it's a different word. And this may be a little nerd for you. And it's okay, you can just tune me out if you need to. But it's from the same root that we get the idea of macro, like I have a degree in economics, and so I took a course in macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is the big picture, and so the Greek word for macro, it talks about length and distance and farness. It's a sort of a length issue, but it's the idea here is that that the blessing in verse 45 is that you are becoming long, you're becoming large, you're extending, God's extending his benefits to you. So anyway, that's a bit of a Greek nerd thing there for you. But it's a different word in the original language than the appearances in verse 42. And so the ones in verse 42 are the same as the root for eulogy. And then the word in verse 45 is similar to, it's the same word that's in Matthew chapter 5 for the Beatitudes, but it's from the root that we get from macro. So there you go. Let's see. Okay. On the back, question 4 is about the significance of Elizabeth and Zechariah agreeing on the name. I touched on this a little bit last week, in that they hadn't talked to each other. They hadn't talked to each other for the entire pregnancy, at least it's not recorded in our scriptures. So they agree on the name John independently. Elizabeth names him that, and then the people say, "Wait a minute, I think, let's see, hold on, let me get the text out here." This is past where we actually read for this week, but it says in verse 59, they came to circumcise the child, and they, meaning the neighbors and relatives, were going to name him Zechariah after his father, but his mother said in verse 60, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "None of your relatives have this name." And they began motioning to his father to find out what name he wanted, and he asked for the writing tablet, and he writes down, "His name is John." And all of them were amazed. And at that moment, then his mouth is open. So that's more about Zechariah. But independently, they agree that his name is John. And so the significance there is that it wasn't that they had this, this conversation before all this happened, because he couldn't speak. I mean, he came out of the temple unable to speak. And so they hadn't talked about this at all during the entire pregnancy. And then they both come up with the name. So it really does stress the fact that this was God's handiwork bringing this child into being, not just human effort.
I thought it was curious that they came up with that name, John. And I got to think about how many John stories there are with the different Johns, and wondering if there was a meaning to the name. And when I looked it up in my other study Bible, it said that John means Yahweh has been gracious.
Right.
And I thought it's sort of, I was having trouble with the idea that they never talked about the name in advance. Mm-hmm. Even if he was mute, you would think that with the excitement of having this baby that they would have talked about that, or they would have gestured, it just,
sure, yeah.
It didn't sound right to me. So but I thought maybe that was why it was such a reasonable name to give for this child.
Right.
Yahweh has been gracious.
Right. So let's see. It's verse 60. Hold on. It says, "No, he will be called John." Yeah, this one doesn't. Let's see what it says. It's not giving me one. Anyway, but you're right. Yeah. So yeah, for Elizabeth to say his name is going to be John, the Lord has been gracious. and then for that to be the same name that that Gabriel had revealed to Zechariah, and they do that independently. Just it's like, for me, it's like one more stamp of God's hand on this child. And then although we're not reading it, the people's response is amazement, and fear comes over them. And what then, verse 66, what then will this child become? For indeed the hand of the Lord was with him. And they understand the name, and they get it, and they put it in together with the context of a husband who hasn't been able to speak the entire pregnancy, and a wife who independently names this child this particular name. Then he confirms it on a writing tablet, and his mouth opens. It's no wonder they proclaim, what is this child going to do? It leads to, if the Jesus birth story hadn't interrupted this, it would have led directly to chapter 3, which is where John is still on he's in the forefront, and he's out in the desert, and he's, calling people to repent and be baptized. So there's this give and take in this birth narrative between John and Jesus, and so they come on and off the stage. So this is John's moment, and it's even more interesting that they're related at some level. So then verse 5, friends and neighbors ponder what has just happened. And then the question there, have you ever had the opportunity to reflect on a potential for God's work in the world via a child who enters the world under incredible circumstances? Just, wondering if people have stories like that. So, because again, if Elizabeth and Zechariah are the new Abraham and Sarah, then yes, there is all sorts of incredible things that are surrounding their story, because incredible things happen in Abraham and Sarah's story. All right. And then we won't see John the Baptist for a little while. We'll switch to week 3. Next week is shepherds, and then we'll talk to, or we'll hear from, sort of, and I use "hear from" in quotes because Joseph doesn't talk. He has no recorded words in our scripture. So that'll be the only passage out of Matthew that we read, and then we'll be back for Mary on Christmas Eve. Good. All right. What other questions do you have?
In question 1, Dean, what are you going for in asking this go-to greeting?
Sure. So the first question each week is sort of an icebreaker kind of moment where you just kind of get people talking. I have no real there's no hidden agenda on there. It's just really like, sometimes if you can just ask a question that people are comfortable answering, it's not like you're just jumping right into the biblical text, but you kind of do a little baby step first, then people get talking, and then when you get to the text, and then then they get there.
You just know I have one person that will ask me, now, what is he getting at with this? What does this have to do with that? And I want an answer. Okay, it's just an icebreaker.
It's just an icebreaker. It's okay. Really designed that way. There's no hidden agenda. There's no like, oh, you got the answer. It's okay. In the days of COVID, it's our go-to greeting is an elbow bump or whatever.
Yeah.
Because again, it ties into Mary and Elizabeth greeting each other. and I'll talk a little bit more about that on Sunday, about how they're the way that they greet one another is full of customs, but then it also gets turned on its head. So I'll save that for Sunday. I'm not going to give away.
Okay, he's not gonna give us a spoiler alert.
No spoilers. No
Okay.
spoilers today. No. I gotta give you some reason to show up on Sunday, right?
Oh, I don't think we've missed any.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear
No.
it.
And
Because-
it's, oh, go ahead, Sherry.
Because I was going to say, well, if your sermon was a little weak, maybe, which it never has been, then you could always rely on Casey for reining
That's
us
right.
all in.
We're gonna sing another song.
Yeah. Or he can sing another song. I find it's wonderful that you can hear him more clearly now than you
Mhm.
could just as part of the choir.
Right.
I like that.
Mhm, mhm. Very good. All righty. Well, we will do this again next week. And I do pray that this is helpful for you and gives you the tools you need to lead your class. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. Yeah, I'm happy to answer whatever.
Sounds good.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
What's our numbers in attendance?
So we were actually up in person this week. I think, gosh, I don't know exactly. I think we were right around, I want to say we were right around 50 in person in first service and 20 something in second service.
That one's
And then at least that many, if not, I think there were more people online in both cases. The online ones are harder to tag because we've just got to, like your particular households. I mean, you just log in on one person's account.
yeah.
It's two people. So we have to figure out a multiplier and say, all right, we had 72 unique views on Sunday for the first service. But that probably represents, upwards
120.
of 120 maybe
Yeah.
people. So you add that to the in-person numbers, and then, it's kind of like, oh, okay. It's just, I have found it's really a matter of, am I comfortable with like 1.7 or do I need to go to 2? I just feel like, we've got enough, there's enough couples watching. If we could identify them, then we could say, there you go. That's like when my family's online, like the weekend we were online for worship, one click, it's 5 people.
Yeah.
So,
And you put their names in the little paragraph, but that's not counted. Yeah.
they go into ACS and we figure that out. We've got, Jan works on that on the back end of things and says, okay, if all the people who actually register, but then there's folks that don't, they just watch. So I mean, there's people we know that watch every weekend but have never registered. So, okay, there's 4 more. Anyway, it is what it is. We're doing our best.
Would you have any problem with us putting together a little blurb and have Debbie send it out to the church saying, get in your car and come down Hilltop Lane to see Candy Cane Lane, and there will be candy canes handed out with masks, social distanced, you're in your car, but enjoy our lights.
I don't see a problem with that. Debbie's out the rest of this week, but but you can send her an email and she'll get to it next week.
Okay.
that works for y'all.
and pick up the candles. I guess Colleen and Jan said they're in, so
Yeah, the candles will be available for pickup on the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So that way it's really close to Christmas Eve and you don't have to worry about trying to keep track of them for a couple of weeks.
and I maybe get them a little earlier. I'm trying to make one trip to all the Sunday school members with the book
okay.
and the candle
Gotcha.
and their
Yeah,
Christmas card.
Yeah, if you're doing that, yeah, we can make arrangements for that.
Okay. Okay.
Because
But
they are
those of
here.
us, but those of us who would lose them do appreciate you're going to keep track of.
Sure. No, I get it. I get it.
It is
No,
what
they
it
would go
is, you know?
they'd go missing at our house too.
Yeah.
Where'd I put those candles? Oh, man.
Yes. Mhm.
Yep. All right. Very good. Well, thank y'all so much.
Okay.
Appreciate you.
Thank
Thank you.
You're very
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
You
Y'all
too.
too.
All of
Bye.
it.
God bless.